joining Interactive Advocacy this afternoon as we kick off our You Matter series. We're talking about finding inner peace after trauma. Everyone is dealing with so much trauma right now, unfortunately, as we're trying to navigate COVID, the pandemic, new variants, civil unrest, social injustice issues. Everyone is just kind of going through so much mental health concerns. So we just kind of wanted to close out the year. And this is another way that we give back. And we're kind of we really wanted to have an opportunity to kind of talk to folks and share with them on how they can find inner peace after trauma and also kind of navigate some of the holidays. So tomorrow we're going to be talking about sexual assault prevention, but we could not get sexual assault prevention started without talking about sexual harassment. And I am so honored and so privileged to invite on the call today my battle buddy, Mr. Orvie Baker. Mr. Orvie Baker is a United States Army veteran. He's an author of the book, Don't Touch Me, Say No to Sexual Harassment. He is a graduate and former instructor of the Defense Equal Opportunity Management Institute, where he he's also been a sexual harassment and assault response and prevention instructor as well. He's a certified victim advocate and sexual assault response coordinator trainer. He is the CEO and founder of the Malik. Can you say that for me?
Malik Group LLC consultant. He is an educator, a motivational speaker, and again, my battle buddy. Some of you may know him as DJ Sapper, and I just wanted to say welcome, 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 welcome. We were just talking earlier that we've been knowing each other for a long time. We actually met at Diomi. Yep. And so some people don't know about Diomi and what that is. So what I would like to do is just kind of open up the floor and give you an opportunity to kind of reintroduce yourself, Orvie, and then we'll kind of get things started.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Like my battle said, my name is Orvie B. Baker Jr. We've been knowing a lot about each other for a long time. We've been in this field for a very long time. And like she said, we met at Diomi, the Defense Equal Opportunity Management Institute. Now, I'll tell you, for those that don't know, this is the pinnacle school for equal opportunity advisors. There's some training out there that you can do as an equal opportunity leader. There's a couple of 2-week courses out there. But until you've been to Diomi, you really haven't experienced this type of training. And once you've been through Diomi, you'll never see the world the same. I guarantee you. Not only was I a student there, I was also an instructor there. So between the both of us, we have a lot to share and a lot to do because our work is never done. And for all of you out there, your work is never done. We're always going to be out here pushing forward. And like my battle always said, we have to be unstoppable because there are people, there are leaders that's counting on us to always move forward. And you never know. And I got to mention this, battle. For those that might be new to this, you never know when there's a survivor in your midst. Every place that I've ever taught, every place that I've ever hung out, I've always ran into a survivor. And I didn't know that they were a survivor until they said, "Thank you for standing up for me. I'm a survivor." So with that in mind, keep that in your back pocket every time. No matter if you're at a club, a bowling alley, or anything. There are people out there listening and watching what you do, especially if you hold a hat as an equal opportunity advisor or advocate, because you never get a second chance to make that first impression. Absolutely, absolutely. And with that being said, you know, we just want to put a friendly trigger warning out there that we are going to be talking about sexual harassment, sexual assault this morning, suicide prevention, human trafficking all week long. So we just wanted to, you know, give everyone a friendly warning that we're going to be talking about some sensitive topics here. But we're going to also talk about how to help you navigate that and find inner peace if you are a person that has experienced some trauma. And you've already come forward and you're working on your path to wholeness and resiliency, or for those individuals that are still needing some assistance, we're here to provide you with some assistance. So again, thank you so much for joining us. I want to just kind of jump right in
and talk about sexual harassment. So what is sexual harassment? I think that's one of the biggest questions people have, and there's so much confusion about it. So can you please give us the definition of sexual harassment? What is it?
Okay, sexual harassment, you'll find different definitions based on harassment, sexual in nature, whether it's physical or non-physical. But I just want to simplify sexual harassment because they got so many definitions. But this is what sexual harassment is in essence. It's bullying. It's bullying that's sexual in nature. So anytime somebody is talking about somebody, that's bullying. When they're doing it in a sexual nature, that's sexual harassment. If somebody is blocking doors, that's bullying. But if they're doing it to try to grope, touch, or get some kind of gratification from it, it's sexual harassment. So bottom line up front, when we're talking about sexual harassment, we're talking about people being bullied using sex or sexual innuendos as a weapon.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And one of the things I wanted to talk about also was some of the myths associated with sexual harassment. A lot of times when people hear sexual harassment, they always assume that it's a male sexually harassing a female. So can we kind of talk about that a little bit, some of the myths associated with sexual harassment and who can be sexually harassed?
Okay, bottom line up front, everyone can be sexually harassed. And I say that because I've heard all kind of myths, and I'm here to try to debunk all of them that I heard. And if everybody out there has a question, please, can they ask Battle? Can they?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
If you have questions, please ask in the comment. If you need to join us, we'll accept a couple of you all to join us. So please ask questions.
So myth number one, men can't be sexually harassed. This is a myth perpetrated by people that feel that men are one type of person, always interested in sex, always after anything that's sexual, and always looking for gratification. This is not true. Women can also be harassers. Men can harass other men. Women can harass other women. Children can be harassed. Elderly can be harassed. So basically, anybody can be harassed, and anybody can be a harasser. Unfortunately for men, most sexual harassment that are reported is majority men. And this is also because most men are confused about what sexual harassment is and won't report it, or they report it as something else. Anybody out there heard of hazing? In the military,
absolutely.
It's a big thing, hazing.
In the military and in college environments as well.
Oh, most definitely. In college environments, in military environments. And it's usually one of these things that some people like to call a rite of passage, but it's not. And one of the things I found when I first joined the military was that some of the hazing that I saw was actually sexual harassment. It wasn't until I became a student at Diomi 15 years later that I realized, whoa, we got a big problem. We've been writing it off as something that is just the norm. It's never the norm to sexually harass anybody, ever.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then can we also talk about some of the different types of sexual harassment? We talked about who can be harassed, but there's also different forms of sexual harassment or harassment. So can you share with us the different types of sexual harassment?
Okay. The first one is physical sexual harassment. This is when somebody's touching, groping, like I said earlier, blocking doors, and a way to get sexual gratification. Another way is non-physical. Now, when we talk about non-physical, we're not just talking about the leering or the whistles or the comments underneath somebody's breath. We're also talking about the emails, using pictures to harass people, even though those might have been pictures that they allowed at a certain time, using that to sexually harass somebody.
Absolutely.
All different ways. The other thing I want to put out there, Battle, is the quid pro quo. Now, we talk about this in the military all the time, but working on the civilian side of it, I see it more than I see it in the military. And quid pro quo basically means this for that, where somebody that's in a position of power, whether they're a manager or not, in a position of power, intimidate and influencing somebody to get sexual favors.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And please, again, feel free to ask any questions that you like. This is a great opportunity. We're here with Mr. Baker, and he has been doing this work, oh my gosh, for, like you said, the better part of 15 years. So please don't hesitate to ask any questions and just jump in. So when we talk about sexual harassment, and this is a great way to kind of talk about your book, Just Say No, or Say No to Sexual Harassment. When is it the right time to say no to sexual harassment?
Anytime is the right time to say no to sexual harassment. And I want to start this off with impact versus intent. Now, a lot of times when these harassments happen, first of all, the person that's being harassed usually doesn't know. They just get a bad feeling about it. But the person that's doing harassment, they know exactly what they're doing. I like to call it a shot across the bow. They want to test the waters to see what's happening. And as an individual, you have the right to tell somebody no. And in my book, I talk about your body being a temple, and you have a right to protect your temple. And this goes for anybody, not just a stranger, because most sexual harassments happen from non-stranger individuals, people you might know, people that everybody know and may know about. But just because they know about them, you still have the right to tell them, no, don't touch me.
Absolutely. I see that Lisa Apple has a question on here. It says, is a boss who always lurks at you continuously, is that harassment? I felt this before.
I would say unequivocally, yes. And the question I have is, what are they lurking for? If this person is a boss or a leader and they're staring at an individual, especially somebody they work with, it's up to them to come up there and ask what the problem. Because if it's not a problem, the boss should say, hey, I was just staring at you because it looks like you didn't blow your nose. You know, I was staring at you because you had something unzipped on you. And I was wondering how to tell you that. It's up to them to have the intestinal fortitude to ask that question if that's the issue. But if somebody's always staring at you, you see them staring at you, you look at them and they don't explain themselves, that is not on you. That is on them.
And you know, that's a great point of saying that. You know, I think that we as advocates always need to have the conversation about sexual harassment and what it looks like, what it is, and what it's not. You know, when I was in the military, as a young soldier in the military, especially long before I heard anything about EO or IG or any of those things, I had been harassed so many times and didn't really know what to call it. I just knew that I felt uncomfortable with what was happening to me. I knew it wasn't right, but I didn't know who to go to. I didn't know how to identify it. It just made me feel uncomfortable. And one of the things that I learned much later on after going to DOME and learning more about EO was just about lurking and folks kind of looking you up and down and that kind of thing. And I had a supervisor that I worked for at one time. And for some reason, every morning, this person made me come to their office to report. It didn't matter where I was in the building. He would call me over the loudspeaker. So that was also very humiliating. And then he would have me come to his office and report. And he would literally just look me up and down, up and down. And then even if I, you know, tried to go around from wherever he was to kind of remove myself from that situation, he would still find a reason to call me into his office. And I realized much later on that this whole time that was a form of harassment, that even though he didn't say anything, it was just, you know, him being in a position of power and wanting to use and abuse that power. So we really need to be able to identify what sexual harassment is, what it looks like, so that way we know when we need to say no. And sometimes it's really uncomfortable, but at the end of the day, we have to remember to just say no, to tell folks that, you know, this is not appropriate.
Thanks for sharing that, Battle. And Ms. Lisa Apple, thanks for sharing your information too. Now, the other thing I want to tell you, based off of what both of you shared, this is part of what's called a continuum of harm. There's a continuum of sexual harassment and sexual assault never happen in the bubble. There's always a start from it. And usually it starts by something as simple as lurking, having an individual isolated to report, and then it continues on that continuum unless somebody stops it. Now, I want to make sure that we make this perfectly clear. Just because you're the person being harassed doesn't mean that you're the only person that can stop this harassment. And this is something else I talk in my book. There's different ways to stop sexual harassment. One of them, you can be direct and tell the person yourself you feel uncomfortable, or you don't appreciate them staring at you. But if you don't feel comfortable, especially when we're talking about somebody that is your superior or senior to you, you could get somebody else to intervene for you. And this is where we come in, Battle, as the advocates. We're the ones that can step in and either say, hey, look, this person feels uncomfortable. Is there a reason why you call them into the office? Or show up when they call them into the office? Or if we have to go further and actually report this to somebody higher. But everybody should be able to take a part and stop somebody from being sexually harassed. No one deserves to be harassed or felt or made to feel uncomfortable in the workplace.
Absolutely. And while we're talking about that, I also would like to kind of chime in a little bit, or have you chime in a little bit on third-party harassment. You know, sometimes when we think about harassment, we only see maybe ourselves as an individual. And sometimes in a situation, you may be comfortable with a person speaking to you a certain way or doing something. You may be comfortable, but there's this third party that's witnessing this, and they now feel uncomfortable. And this could also be considered as a form of sexual harassment. So can you talk a little bit about that third party harassment and what that looks like?
Battle, that ties right into what I was saying earlier about not knowing who your audience is. Again, there are a lot of people out there that don't come out and say, hey, I've been a victim, I've been harassed, or this harassed me. That doesn't mean that they're not being harassed. First and foremost, a lot of this happens from unprofessional behavior at work. So I got to start it there, because in the military, you know as well as I do, there's a lot of jokesters, and a lot of us joke around people that we're familiar with. Now, it's important about being familiar with people, because I'm not going to sit here and make people the bad guy or the bad woman for joking with each other. But I am going to push back and say you need to be aware of your surroundings. If you have a brand new work member or a brand new private that comes into the situation in the workplace, you don't know them. And it's not your job to force them to know you. You need to be professional. And if this person either says, I'm uncomfortable, or you see the nonverbals, and we'll talk about nonverbals later, it is up to you, not that person, to stop that, because this all comes back to being professional.
Absolutely. Well, let's jump right into those nonverbals. I think that is a great segue to that, because again, it kind of ties right back into what are we looking for when we're thinking about sexual harassment. You know, so let's talk about some of those nonverbals. What are they?
Okay. Nonverbals is something that most of us grow up with. You don't have to have a PhD. You don't need to go to school. But there are certain things that somebody would do or say that gives you an inclination that they're not comfortable or unhappy with being around you. Something as simple as turning away when you talk, or clutching themselves when you come around, or getting quiet and shutting down. These are all indicators. And it might not be you that they're doing this to. It might be the person that's your friend, your colleague, your buddy that's making this person feel uncomfortable, because you don't know the history. But again, this comes back to us as individuals to pay attention to this. Now, when you see this, I don't want anybody turning around and say, uh-oh, where's the predator at? I need to punch somebody in the face. That is not what we're asking you to do. But we're asking you to be aware and say, wait a minute, pump the brakes. What's going on here? We were joking, and all of a sudden this person shut down. Let me open my eyes and open my ears and see what's going on. Right. Because you picked that up.
And, you know, and again, we're in that time where people are making jokes, the sexual innuendos. I listen to some of these young people talk, and people are more freer or independent as they're talking about sex. And you're right. You know, what's comfortable for one person may absolutely not be comfortable for someone else. And we have to pay attention to what people are saying, that body language, again, those nonverbs, to kind of make sure that we're not offending those individuals around us, because you might find yourself in a situation where you're now being charged with sexual harassment, you know, just because of something that someone else saw or witnessed. And not only that, there's also, again, that whole position of power. So, you know, that third party is witnessing this, and then there's a concern. Are you going to exhibit favoritism for this individual because you're in a position of power? You know, again, we've been in this world, this advocacy type stuff in EO for such a long time. We've seen this before. You know, I've heard where people have come in and said, hey, you know, Ms. J, everyone in this office, they think it's comfortable to give back massages. Well, I'm not comfortable with that. I mean, they seem to be okay with it. It's not that big of a deal. But I'm not uncomfortable, and I don't know how to tell them that I'm not comfortable with this, you know, and then folks will kind of feel like, well, we won't do it when they're around. But the reality is that it goes back to what you were saying, making sure that we're respecting those boundaries in the workplace, and we're exhibiting leadership type behaviors and qualities. We're adults, we're in a working environment. Those are not the things that we should be doing anyway. Right. So we just have to make sure that we're always thinking about our surroundings. But I would like to, again, open up the floor for any questions. This is a great opportunity. We have Mr. Orvie Baker on the call with us today. I'm so excited about having him here. He has been doing this work for the better part of 20 years. We've known each other for at least about 15 now, and he's been doing sexual harassment, sexual assault prevention. And so that's what we're talking about this afternoon. We're also going to be talking about healthy relations. Respect and boundaries. And I do think that together we can change those social norms to prevent sexual harassment and sexual violence. And it definitely starts with respecting those boundaries. So what is some of the steps that we can take to foster a climate of respecting boundaries, not just in our workspaces, but actually in our communities?
Well, I would say to that is a big question with a whole bunch of answers. But if we're talking about in the community, we have to set what's called the socially accepted norms. Now, this is a hard one when you're outside the military. It's a little more easier because we have rules and regulations that we can lock in. But in the community, it's a little harder. And the best way to do it is to model that behavior. So if we want to make sure that people feel comfortable, not only do we call it out when people are feeling uncomfortable, we don't rationalize when it happens. And one of the examples I want to use is something that I saw all the times with senior officers, and this was a case of people saying honey or sweetie pie. Now, in a lot of communities, I'm from Chicago, but I grew up in the South. That is an accepted norm, but not everybody's okay with that. And if one person is not okay with that, it's a problem everywhere if you want to make a community that's safe and conducive for everybody to feel safe in. So what I ask is not to tell somebody they're bad for saying, but make them understand the impact to others. Your intent might be endearing to call somebody sweet or honey, but the impact is detrimental to this person that's hearing it for whatever reason they have. So if that's the case, we don't have to have a big drawn out class for it. Just stop doing it. And again, this is all the way back to professionalism. And when I say professionalism, what I'm really talking about is respect for others. If you understand how to respect others, especially people from the South, this is not too hard. But if it's so hard for people to get this, I got to call them out on it. You're rationalizing. And we will not accept rationalizing when somebody has to be the victim because you feel better doing this or saying these things.
And, you know, Battle, that was definitely something that I had to learn. My family's from Central America. We're from Panama. And, you know, when you think about culture, right, and how people are socialized and how they communicate, we're very touchy-feely people. You know, we give hugs, we give kisses, and everyone is like sweetie or baby or honey. And because for us, it was a term of endearment. And that was something that I had to learn to not do, especially after I you know, embraced this line of work and started doing it, because you're right. You know, what can be a term of endearment for one person can make someone else very uncomfortable. And now, especially now, as we're trying to do our part to recognize his and her pronouns, you know, we want to make sure that we are addressing people correctly. So baby, sweetie, honey shouldn't be used in the workplace at all.
Right.
Again, it's hard in the community. But again, if you identify what the trauma is or how it can impact someone, again, intent versus impact, we can nip it in the bud right away. And the biggest thing is to just talk about it. Just have the conversation. Just say, hey, I'm uncomfortable with this, and respect those boundaries. Also, what are some ways that we can work towards inner peace after we've experienced some form of sexual harassment?
Again, this is one that is different for every individual. And I want to caution people from trying to make a list of what a person should do or should feel after sexual harassment. This is solely on the individual that experienced it. And this was something that, again, going through Endearment and doing this for a while, there's not a right answer. There are some people that when they're sexually harassed, they shut down. They want to be away from other people. There's other people, when they're sexually harassed, they want to be around more people. They want to do more stuff. And none of those are wrong. The thing is, it's what makes that person comfortable to get back to what's their norm. And we have to be okay with that. We being the people that's trying to advocate for them. Now, I'm not saying that they can just go out and do anything that they want, but I am saying that everybody's process to heal from this is different from one person to another.
You know, that's one of the things that we do talk about, and we see that a lot, not just with sexual harassment, but with sexual assault. And one of the things that I've heard senior leaders or just colleagues say, you know, well, why aren't they over it already? You know, there's this false sense of expectation that if a person has experienced trauma, no matter what that trauma is, and that there is a time frame that they should be over it. And, you know, just because you may be able to move forward, maybe in a year or 2 years, doesn't mean that the other person may be able to move forward the same way. And then we also have to factor in different triggers, you know, and how to process them. So what are some of those myths associated with time frames in terms of processing trauma? You know, how do we get around that?
Well, some of those myths, they range all over the place from, hey, this person didn't cry, so it wasn't that big of a deal, to, oh, they were just trying to get somebody in trouble, so that's why they're milking this. It really goes back to what I was talking about earlier, that everybody has a different way of processing things because everybody has a different experience. And this is something that, as an equal opportunity advisor, I had to stress to these senior leaders, because their intent is to try to get people back to normal so they can work. But the impact is, you don't care about me. You actually think I should just get over this in a certain time frame that suits you or the mission. Thinking about people as individuals, you have to think that this may not have been the first time that they were harassed or assaulted. And like you were talking about the triggers, these triggers might go all the way back to their childhood days, but you will never know that. They may not ever tell you that. And it's not their responsibility to educate you on everything that is bothering them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I see that Lisa had a comment over here. Can you see it? It says, it's important to tell your story as much as a positive way to make sure a victim knows that they are not alone. Thank you for sharing that. And that is absolutely correct. That, you know, everything that you'll hear us talking about all week long, we're going to share that you matter. And it's a reminder that you're not alone. You know, we think sometimes as we're dealing with trauma, because we've all experienced some form of trauma in our lives, no matter how big or no matter how small, everyone has experienced some form of trauma. But at the end of the day, you just have to know that you're not in it by yourself, that you're not the only person that have experienced that trauma. And even though you feel in that moment that you're all alone and that you're by yourself, there is another side of it, and you can come through it holistically. So absolutely, I think that that was a great point, that you're not alone. And we have to share our stories. We have to continue to share our stories. You know, when I started doing advocacy work initially, and I think a lot of people are led to advocacy for so many different reasons. But one of the things that I have found the most, having spoken to many colleagues in this line of work and have been doing this for so long, is that what kind of led me to this is my own personal traumas. Some of the things that I've experienced in my life, and how sharing my story has absolutely helped me holistically. And just to kind of caveat off of what Lisa said in her comment, we have to continue to share our stories whenever we can, because it also allows other people to see, look, this person was in a similar situation like I was. They've had trauma, and now look how they're thriving and moving forward in spite of. They didn't allow that trauma to define who they are as individuals. And one thing that I can say, if I don't say anything else, is, you know, don't let trauma define who you are. You know, I tell people that, you know, when you see me, I may have been, you know, this whole person, and everything might have been perfect at one time, and then trauma enters into my life. And, you know, I'm still a great person. I'm fun. I like to, you know, celebrate with my family and do great work. But I'm also a person that has experienced trauma. It's how I move forward now that I've experienced that trauma that brings me to my wholeness. So absolutely share your stories. Definitely. I just wanted to give anyone an opportunity to ask a question. I know we have some people on the line. If you feel like asking a question or making a comment, please feel free to do so. How do we get to peace though? What are some tips that we can kind of put in our toolkit to just kind of maybe some different practices or some different methods that we can do holistically? Would you recommend to getting us to inner peace if you're a person that has experienced trauma?
For people that have experienced trauma, I have to say two things. I want to caveat on what Lisa posted. That's absolutely correct and perfect. I also want to add that it's up to us as advocates, as leaders, to make sure that they're comfortable to come forward, because not everyone is comfortable to come forward with their story. And usually when they are, it's because they're in an environment where they feel welcome. People like you, Lisa, people like you, Battle, that share your story to let them know that they're not alone. You were talking about how you got into this field. Battle, I got into the field because, unfortunately, I didn't even know we had an EO program for 15 years. Mm-hmm. I was an E7, and I saw this program where they brought some Hawaiian dancers to Germany. And I'm thinking as a leader, hey, how can we have this stuff so our soldiers can be motivated and taken care of? And then I learned, no, this is an equal opportunity program where we do this and more to take care of soldiers. So that's how I got into it. Now, when we're talking about making the climate safe for people and people feeling better about it, it is so important for us not only to share the story, but let them know that we got their back. Some of the jobs that I had where I went around teaching, I can't tell you how many times somebody has pulled me to the side after I got off the stage and said, Mr. Baker, I don't know why I'm sharing this with you. I've never shared this with anybody, but I was sexually assaulted in basic training, or I was sexually assaulted in work. And the thing that I'm honored that people share that with me, but the thing that hurt me the most is usually people that came to tell me this were majors, were sergeant majors, were master sergeants that held this on for decades. And only now they felt safe enough to share this. And when I look at things like this, I think, how long has this affected their life? So when we get back to, because I don't want to get off topic of the question, how do we take care of ourselves? There's so many ways to do it. I see Lisa has meditate. That is actually a great way. I was one of those soldiers that didn't believe it until I did it. It is awesome. But there are other things that you can do that's based on how you feel comfortable. Now, this is where I introduce what my battle would know from Diomi, speaking for self.
Speaking for self.
Speaking for self, I like to be alone in nature. I like to take long walks. I like to listen to water. I like to listen to music. I used to work out real heavy, but you know, those jumping out of planes caught up with me, so I can't do what I do. But I still like to do things that's great for me that might not be great for others. So if there's somebody that likes to paint, they should get into painting more. If they like to go take pictures, they should take pictures. If they like to sit out and listen to jokes, whatever it takes for them to decompress and disconnect from whatever's bothering them, that's important. Now, I got to stress this, Battle. When we're talking about this taking care of each other from harassment, this is equally important for those that advocate. If you're not doing self-care, you can't do this job, people. You have to be able to take care of yourself because it is your job to take care of others. You have to model the behavior. So everything you're telling people to do and everything we're talking about doing, you need to put that in your notepad and do for yourself.
Absolutely. I was on a session just recently and we talked about that exact same thing. You know, who cheers for the cheerleader when the cheerleader can't cheer anymore? You know, as advocates, we pour so much into folks. Unfortunately, sometimes we neglect ourselves as well. So you are absolutely right. Self-care also includes us. And, you know, we do ourselves a disservice for those individuals that we champion for if we're not doing it for ourselves. If we're not holistic, if we're not healthy, you know, how can I pour tea into your cup if I have nothing left in mine, if I'm on empty? So you're absolutely right. We have to make sure that we're doing those things. And sometimes we just have to disconnect, you know, disconnect from social media, disconnect from everything that's going on around us, and just take a moment to kind of recharge so we can go back in and fight the good fight. I see also Chrissy joined us. Thank you so very much. We have Anthony Jr. that made a comment, so embodying a peace of mind. Absolutely. You know, you want to embody that total holistic peace of mind and what that looks like for you. And again, like you said, Battle, that's going to be different for everyone. Some people will meditate, some people will go jogging, some people will run. I do everything from baking to writing. So it really just depends on where I'm at in that space. But you absolutely need to take that time for yourself, especially if you're a person that has experienced trauma. But even if you haven't experienced trauma, right? You know, and you're just trying to navigate the stress of the holidays, you know, especially after being locked in and confined for so long. And now we're getting out and moving around, and we have all of these new concerns with all of these different variants that we're hearing about. You know, sometimes you just need to decompress and take some me time and do some self-care just to kind of navigate the everyday stressors of life. So, and that's what You Matter and finding that inner peace is also really about. It's also about self-care and what does that self-care looks like for you. So please be sure, you know, sometime as you're hustling and bustling and taking care of your family and friends and doing all of the wonderful things that you do, that you find a few moments, you carve out some time to make sure that you're doing some self-care, no matter what that looks like for you. And just take a moment for you, you know, just take a moment for you. So what I would like to do, we've got about 15 minutes or so on the call. If anyone wants to make any comments or any questions, you know, please don't hesitate to go ahead and drop them. If you missed the call earlier today, don't worry. We're going to be able to post that information on our link tree. You'll see some information there. Mr. Baker's bio is also going to be added on to our link tree. So if you want to hear some more great stuff about him, please be sure to check out his bio. But I want to circle back to your book. Let's talk about that a little bit. So you're an author and you have a book that's called Say No to Harassment. So can we talk about that a little bit more? What inspired you to write that?
Well, actually, my stepdaughter inspired me to write the book. After all these years of dealing with sexual harassment, sexual assault, and training it hits a little different when it's happening to somebody you love. And she was going through, you know, puberty and in the middle school area. And she was becoming a developed young girl. And a little boy was picking on her, touching her inappropriately. And of course, being a dad, you know, I wanted to go there and let this person see my face. Not to harm him, but to let him know that she has a defender. Her mom said, no, you got that military mindset. You don't understand these can be handled in words, and we're going to talk. And don't get me wrong, words do work, but usually it works for somebody that's ready to receive those words. So I'm not going to get into the communication process, but being a boy and knowing how young boys think, I was thinking we need a little more interaction here. But the mom went to school. They had a little meeting. The first thing the teacher did was blame the victim, talking about my daughter and how she dressed. Maybe she should wear some loose clothing. Maybe she shouldn't look like she does. And I'm thinking, who does this teacher think she is? But I'm trying to be calm because the mom went there, and the mom came home and said, look, it's all handled. All you have to do is talk. The parents came. The little boy said he was sorry, and it's done. Not even 3 days later, my daughter comes home and said, it happened again. I said, all right, you had your time to talk. Now I'm going to talk to her. So I took my daughter out to my office, a.k.a. the garage. That's where my kick bag and stuff is, and I explained to her, the reason this happened has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with what you're wearing. The problem is this little boy's not being educated right. Now, you told the teacher, you told us. Now I'm telling you, you have a right to defend yourself. Now, when I told my daughter this, she really felt kind of good that she could stand up for herself. She thought she had to be quiet. And she went to school, and I taught her some moves. And she came home and said, guess what, Daddy? He tried it again, and I did exactly what you told me to do. And I'm not going to have a problem anymore. And I told her, you just let that little boy learn that it's not okay to touch you. It's not okay to touch anybody. But if he thinks about it again, he's not going to touch you. Unfortunately, I didn't train my daughter on how not to become the bully. Because with this new power, every day she was going to school trying to chop this little kid in the head and the throat because it worked for her. So I had to go to school, talk to them about it, and I had to tell the teacher, look, you're right. She shouldn't become the bully, but you're wrong in making her the problem. The problem is nobody should be putting their hands on anybody. So my daughter's friends would come over, and they wanted to go to the office to learn how to do palm heel hits, you know, how to chop somebody in the throat. And one of the little girls said, Mr. Baker, you should write a book on that. And I said, you know what, I should. And I sat down, wrote a couple of notes, and put it away. But then I was talking to one of my soldiers, telling them about, you know, investing in themselves. And I said, I should take this opportunity to practice what I preach. So I wrote a book. It was about 70 pages long. And I sat down and I said, no kid wants to read this. So I chopped it up, thought about my mindset, and let my daughter read it. And it became a ROE, or Rules of Engagement, of how to deal with sexual harassment. And that's how the book came out. I wrote it back in 2012. And most people that get the book, they love it. Unfortunately, some schools don't like, because they see it as a book that promotes violence, but it's about self-defense. And if you look at the book, there are steps that you have to do before you get to self-defense, because I don't want anybody just going to school fighting somebody. But what I don't want more than anything is for somebody to go to school and feel helpless. That is the worst feeling to have, and it's the worst feeling to teach somebody that they have to be quiet. They have to be nice and prim, and they can't do anything about it, but just hope it goes away. And if they're quiet about it, maybe it goes away. This is how predators hear that. Hey, this person's not going to say anything, so I can touch them and ratchet it up more. Because if they say something, they're the problem. Absolutely. And in my book, I'm telling them, no, you're never the problem. I make it my personal choice. It is my job to make predators uncomfortable. Absolutely. I don't want to harm them, but I am so sincere about taking care of advocates and survivors. I want to make sure they're uncomfortable. And the best way to make sure they're uncomfortable is that we have these conversations, we talk, and let them know it's never okay to touch somebody. It is not fun, and it is not accepted.
Absolutely. And you know, and to be quite honest with you, you know, like-minded people, there's camaraderie in that. So, you know, we talked about those social norms earlier. You know, if more males are seen standing up and speaking out against these type of you know, social norms that perpetuate rape culture or toxic behaviors, you'll have more people inclined to do the same thing. And it really doesn't matter what your gender is, whether you're male, female, if you are witnessing these things happening and you stand up and you speak out against them when you see them happening, you're more inclined to do the same thing. We talk about just don't stand there. Don't. If you see something, say something every time. I see that Anthony Jr. had a question on here. What are the appropriate steps in helping someone who came to you confiding in being sexually harassed or sexually assaulted? This is a great question. Battle, you want to take it away?
Sure. The first thing you have to do is ask what they want. A lot of times as advocates, we want to jump in and say, hey, we're going to take care of this. But before we jump forward, we need to ask them, how do you want to address this? How can I be of service or help you? And sometimes they will tell you, hey, I want you to go tell this person to leave me alone. Hey, I want you to come around so they don't bother me. Or, hey, I just wanted to vent so I don't bust them upside the head. All these things are things that have happened to me as an advocate, and I had to say, Roger, got it. I see another question down there by Lisa. How do we deal with gossip of others thinking that you and the harasser having a relationship? And the only thing I can tell you about that, Lisa, is you have to be above par. Rumors are going to happen. A lot of times people want to tear you down because of the job that you do. But as long as you're a professional, every time you come up, they can't take that away from you. They can make up stories, but they can't take away from the facts. And the people that's going to know the facts are the people that see you every day, not just one person that's trying to tear you down. And I get you. It's happened to me quite a few times. And it wasn't the harasser, it was the leadership.
Absolutely. And I want to circle back real quick, if you don't mind, Battle. I know we have about 9 more minutes on the call. To Anthony Jr.'s question, when he talked about some of the appropriate steps. One of the things that I also wanted to remind you is that when we're talking about a person that was sexually assaulted, if they confide in you, know that that means that they keep you in very high regard. They have a lot of respect for you. And that is definitely a huge thing, that this person sees you as a friend. So when they give you that or share that information with you, now you have to safeguard this information for this person to their level of comfort. Never internalize it. Never say, well, this is what I would do in this situation. Never make it about you, and always remember that it is really up to that person. Like my Battle was saying, they only may want help with venting. They may only want to share the information. Maybe if you want to ask them something, you can ask them in terms of level of comfort. Do they feel like they want to get some help? And help can mean going to a doctor and just getting checked out and making sure that they're okay medically, but they may not want to report it. And you can't pressure them to do that. They have to be able to do it on their own. And if they feel comfortable enough to bring it to you and share it with you and talk to you about it, then they'll be comfortable enough to share what they need to do. And you have to respect that. Okay. So whatever they need or whatever they want in that moment, you have to respect it, because it's about that individual. So I just wanted to just kind of caveat and piggyback off of what you were saying earlier, Battle. But yeah, so this has been a great afternoon. We've had some really great questions, some comments. I really just wanted to say thank you all so much for joining us. Before we wrap up, did anyone have any more questions or any comments that they wanted to make before we exited? Was there any more questions? Okay, so Battle, I want to kind of jump back in and go back to you. We've been talking about inner peace and defining it and what it looks like and how do we get to a place of inner peace after experiencing trauma. So one of the things that I want to know, and I'm talking and asking all of our guest speakers, what does inner peace mean to you?
Inner peace to me means my safe place. And I'm looking at what Miss Lisa Apple put down. Mental health is health. One of the things my mom used to say to us is, your health is your wealth. So your mental health is your wealth. This goes to how you assist other people, to how you work in the world. And for me, the more you can get that inner peace, the more you can help make a difference in the world. And it's just like you said, Battle, about the tea. You can't give tea to somebody when your tea is gone. But if you take the time to harvest those leaves, to heat that water, and have that kettle filled up, you can give tea to quite a few people and keep giving tea because you're making sure you have an abundance of tea to give.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, that's what this has been all about. We're talking about it all day long, Monday to Wednesday, finding inner peace after trauma because you matter. You know, Battle, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to continue to give back. You've been doing this work, as I've been sharing it for, oh my gosh, over 20 years. I'm just so honored and so privileged to just know you and know all of the great work that you've been doing and continue to do. Again, if you all want to know more about Mr. Orvie Baker Jr., please check out our link tree. His bio is there. It'll take you to his website, his social media platforms. Would you do me a favor, Battle, and drop your contact information in the comment section below so folks can get in contact with you? You definitely want to stay tuned to this amazing person, this awesome author, motivational speaker, encourager, educator. I mean, everything from sexual harassment to sexual assault. You know, we're talking about it. And this is why we advocate. We love this work that we're doing. We're passionate about it. We use our voices wherever and whenever we can for those individuals who feel like they don't have a voice. So I just want to again say thank you so much for joining us. I absolutely appreciate you. I look forward to seeing you all again tomorrow. Remember, we're doing this until Wednesday, tomorrow morning, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 8 a.m. Pacific Time. We're going to be back on the call again tomorrow morning, starting off with Anne-Marie LeBon, and then other way around, Dr. Akul. We're going to be talking with her first thing in the morning, and we're going to be talking about cultivating inner peace. And she's going to give you some great tips that you can put in your toolkit. She's a subject matter expert on inner peace. You do not want to miss it. She is phenomenal. She has about 8 or 9 books out. She's just into self-help and motivation. You're going to love her. She'll be on here tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. Then we're going to go to 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We'll be back again. We'll be back with Miss Dupont. We're going to be talking about some great stuff with her as well. And I look forward to just seeing you all joining us as we continue to close out the end of the year, talking about finding inner peace after trauma. And remember, you matter. So again, thank you so much for joining us. I look forward to seeing you all again really soon. And until next time, continue to be unstoppable. Thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody. Battle. Thanks, Val.
All right. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
They said I should